Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our cube set review for Avatar The Last Airbender. In our previous episode, we went over white, blue and black. A link to that will be down in the show notes below. Today, we're going to be going over everything else. And with that out the way, let's take it away with our first red card of the day.
First up, we have Firebender Ascension. This is 1 and a red for an enchantment. That when this enchantment enters, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. It also has, whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, you may copy that ability. You choose new targets for the copy. So the base level of this is it's a 2-mana 2/2 with Firebending 1. That's not the worst downside. Like, there was a long period in Magic where we didn't get kind of on-rate red creatures, that kind of stuff. Without a downside anyway. And this is a perfectly fine card for just making a creature. Let's talk about what we're here. This has the potential to do some very cool stuff. There is a lot of things in red that will trigger this. So firstly, the firebending creature will trigger this because you make the mana when it attacks with the firebending 1. So it will trigger it by itself. So in theory, if it's left alone, it will just slowly uptick. And then if that's all you do, you'll get double red. But really, that's not kind of why we're including this in a cube. We want to be doubling up some cooler attack triggers. Like, this really does feel like a Gruul or a Boros card to me. Like, doubling up a Rabble Master seems really, really good. Doubling up a Grave Titan or a Prime Titan seems a bit excessive. You've probably won by that point, but that's really cool. There's a bunch of stuff that works really well with this. There is some stuff that doesn't work with this that is a little bit frustrating. My initial thing was, Hellrider, sick. Unfortunately, I don't think that works, because Hellrider is whenever a creature you control attacks, Hellrider deals 1 damage to defending player, so I don't think that works with the way this has been worded. Which, because Hellrider is whenever a creature you control attacks, Hellrider deals 1 damage to defending player, so I don't think that works with the way this has been worded. And also, Rabble Masters that make them at the start of combat, I don't think technically work with this, because this says when they attack, and start of combat is not attacking.
Yeah, so with Rabble Master, you'll get the power boost twice, but you wouldn't get 2 goblins.
Exactly, but like something like Squee Dubious Monarch, which makes a goblin when it attacks, you would double up because that is a attack trigger, not at the beginning of combat trigger. So there is a weird spot where, like, for this to really work, if I'm honest with you, I would want to make sure all my things worked with it. Otherwise, there's a little bit of a feel bad, which might be more squeeze than it's worth, more juice. I've buggered this one up. I've buggered that up, James. But what do you think about like this, James? Like, where do you land on Firebender Ascension?
I think I'm going to be a skeptic on this one, to be honest. So we have a Grizzly Bear with Firebending 1, and we can do a lot better than that. I think the Firebending it's fine. You know, it gets better if you have combat tricks and stuff. There's an actual productive thing to use the mana on, right? You go turn 2 this, you go turn 3, attack with it, play a 1 mana trick, and play a 3-drop. That is quite nice. But I basically think that's all this card does. In reality. So the reason I say that, right, is I think the rest of the card is so win more. Like,
yeah.
You have to have a good attack a bunch of times with your creatures. You're winning that game anyway, it doesn't matter. But you got this doubling ability, but you then need another creature to actually make impactful, because doubling the firebending and by that civilization game doesn't actually matter. Like, so you compare this, for example, to the White Ascension we reviewed last week. The reason I like the white one a lot more is the white one, if I cast that on turn 2 and then we both play a bunch of creatures and they stare at each other and maybe some of them trade off, I'm accumulating counters on my White Ascension, right? Whereas this needs me to actually have good attacks. So basically it's only getting me counters in the games that I'm already winning. And I don't really value then doubling up on more attack triggers in those games. Like, I just think I'm going to win that game anyway. So yeah, I basically just view this as 2 mana, 2/2 Firebending 1.
That's fair. Yeah, just the math on this will work out that by the time it comes online, you've probably already won. I think that's a very good. Like, there are some cubes that their aggro decks don't win until like turn 8, just because like it's slower and an environment. And in that world, then I think this is okay. But yeah, I do agree that Win Mori is probably the best way to strike, because rather than this, we could just run a 2-drop that has a really good attack trigger. I don't know, Inti seems pretty good. Just run Inti. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I say what I would like, it doesn't mean like the game is literally over by the time that trigger goes on the stack, but it means that was a game that I would have won even if I didn't have this trigger doubling ability, right? So I just don't really value that.
From one red 2-drop to another, what do you think of Firebending Student, James?
Yeah, this is a little bit more interesting. So this is 1 red for a 1/2 creature human monk with prowess. And it has Firebending X, where X is this creature's power. So when you attack, you're going to add red mana equal to its power. That mana lasts until the end of combat. So I think basically this would be pretty good for a deck with a like a power deck with a bunch of tricks is basically where I'm seeing this. And it kind of plays both ways with the tricks, right? Because you get the option of you could even like play a trick pre-combat and get a bunch of mana when you attack. But more likely you're gonna play a cantrip pre-combat, get a prowess trigger, attack with this, get say 2 red mana, then you cast a burn spell or you cast your combat trick, and this is then doing good work for you, right? Because it's letting you multi-spell in a spot where you wouldn't normally be able to, and it's getting him some damage. It's also kind of hard to block, right? Because you're representing an instant quite strongly. Even if you tapped all your lands free combat, you're still representing the possibility of a prowess trigger. So that's kind of cool. Having said that, I don't think... I'd still rather have something like a Sprite Dragon in that spot with its evasion, and I don't think this makes it as like just a red aggro card. I think it's too weak for that. So I'd say it's like quite a narrow spot it has for Cube running a prowess aggro deck with some combat tricks. But if that's your Cube, then I think this is a good inclusion.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think the only other place, or the only other deck that I think is worth mentioning with this, is the like Powers Matters deck that they were trying in the Go Vintage Cube for a while. This is not VV, but a lot of cards are not VV, and having some redundancy in that effect, in that it is a creature that makes mana equal to its power. Like, you are limited to the time window with this, of it just being used in combat with the mana, whereas VV is just whenever you want to on your turn. Shockingly, it's a very broken magic card. But in that deck where you're running like the free pump spells that give it +4/+floor and that kind of stuff, like, this will make you a lot of mana if you're doing that deck and you have ways of doing it at instant speed. Again, this is not VV, but a lot of cards aren't, and as like next tier down, this must be actually quite high in terms of effects that deck would kind of want to run.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is, right, the mana's only red mana, so you're kind of using it for burn spells or tricks in my mind, right? Like, there's just not that much, you can't cast your cantrips and whatnot with it.
No, that's fair. But yeah, but it's like I think in that build, I think this does still slot in.
Sure.
But yeah. Outside of that, I think that is a higher potential upside than just another expensive Monastery Swiftspear. But like, the base level is a slightly more expensive Swiftspear, and that's not the end of the world, I think.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
All right, let's keep going with our last red card of the day. Last up in red, we have Zhao, the Moon Slayer. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature human soldier. It has Menace, non-basic lands enter tapped. You can pay 7 to put a Conqueror counter onto Zhao, and then as long as Zhao has a Conqueror counter on him, non-basic lands are mountains. So this is an obvious homage to Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon style of effects. But those are obviously very powerful effects that we don't actually see that much in Cube, and I think primarily that's because people don't like them in Cube. Like, in Constructed, they are cornerstones of a bunch of decks in like Legacy and Vintage. But in Cube, we don't really muck around with Blood Moon because it's quite tough to get working. Like, it only rewards the mono red player, and it just ruins the fun of anyone else there. Because it's not like in Constructed where like there could be other players playing red. If you're taking all the red cards, it's unlikely anyone else is going to be as much in red as you. That's one main reason why we haven't really seen those cards played as much. But to get to that point with this card, you have to spend 7 mana. You will get there eventually. But kind of why you were probably putting this in a cube in the first place is the non-basic lands enter tap. Like this is... We talked about Thalia a bit in the last episode as like a aggressive creature that can slow down your opponents and give you a tempo swing. And this does do that in a Red X aggressive deck. Like a Red X aggressive deck isn't going to be running too many dual lands. It's not going to be running triomes or lands that come into play tapped. It's wanting to curve out and hit face. And this is a 2-mana aggressive creature with evasion that punishes greedy mana bases. And I do like that. Like I touched on it last episode. I like the world we're in where just like 4 and 5 color decks can exist and be playable in Cube, but I would like it to be not as free. And I think this card going in a Cube, it's not going to destroy those decks. Like if this comes down, your opponent will see it coming and have time to answer it before their lands are locked out of the game. That's a good thing. But it will still at least slow them down if they're playing their shock lands or their fetch lands, that kind of stuff. Like it will still slow them and give the aggressive decks a nice way of doing something and pushing some damage through and basically just getting ahead on tempo. And it's like a solid card that isn't just like a generically... It's a nice way of taking it that isn't just like the generic kind of like Broadside Bombardiers is a broken magic card style of red deck that we've seen. So I do like this card. I'm not sure what the ceiling is on it. I'm not sure how high it could go in cubes, but I think it is a cool card.
Yeah, it does some interesting stuff. I think... yeah, like the reason we don't play Blood Moons in Cube, I think, is mostly just that the gameplay's miserable, right? It's not that we don't want to punish the 4 or 5 color deck, it's that we don't want to punish them in a way that leads to complete non-games. And that's mostly what Blood Moon does, right? Whereas, I know you've got to pay 9 mana to make this a Blood Moon. Like, if people are complaining about that, they should build their decks differently, probably, I think. So I think it's fine on that front. I don't think this is cracking into super powerful cubes, just because, yes, non-basic lands enter tapped is good, but you're going to play against a bunch of decks where it doesn't matter, right? In which case, this is just a 2-mana 2/2 menace. And then even against the decks where it does matter, it's like, well, a bunch of the non-basic lands were going to enter tapped anyway, right? This doesn't do anything to the triomes and the surveil lands and whatnot. So it's sort of quite specific draws where it's going to be good, but there certainly will be draws where it's very annoying. And the 5-color deck will really need to kill it. I don't think it's, on the level of, say, Generous Plunderers, an aggressive 2-drop we've seen recently, right? Or like a Magda or a Fear of Missing Out. Something in that realm, but I think like on the next level down, like 2/2 Menace is like, it's not good, but it's fine. You can run that. And this is a perfectly playable card, which I guess you can just board out when you're against the monocolor people if you have something better to bring in.
No, yeah. I think a very solid card, but yeah. Probably not one for the highest powered level cubes. Our next card, our first green card, however, James, I'm incredibly high on. What do you think of Badger Mole Cub? Yeah,
I think this one's pretty cool. So this is 1 green for a 2/2 creature Badger Mole. It says, when this creature enters Earthbend 1. So Earthbend, I think this is the first time we've met Earthbend. So Earthbend 1 is target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste. It's still a land. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. So if it was Earthbend 2, we'd put 2 counters on it. When it dies or is exiled, you return it to the battlefield tapped. So 2-mana 2/2 makes your land into a 1/1, fine. But it also says whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. So that land you animate is now going to be tapping for 2 green, but any other mana dorks you play also tapping for an additional green. This seems really solid to me. It's nice that you get stats with your with your ramp, and you kind of get 2 bodies. And you don't see that too often. And this is ramping you by 1, right? Because it's you're making your land tap for an additional mana. But the time I think it actually gets exciting is if you have a bunch of other mana dorks in your deck, right? Your Birds of Paradise now taps for like a blue and a green. That's really good. My only concern with this card is just that the 2 mana accelerant slot in green is really competitive, right? I do think this card is quite strong. I don't know that it's better than Fanatic of Ronus or better than Sylvan Caryatid. But I'd be very willing to try it. I think it does some interesting stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to shit on this card for a sec, but then I'm going to tell everyone why I really like it and why I'm going to be testing it for myself. So for me, the negatives are that effectively this is kind of like a mono green card because it's a card that is generating mono green. Or it's a 2 mana dork that only makes an additional green. It doesn't fix you for every color like a lot of 2 mana dorks do. And it's making your Llanowar elves, shall we say, tap for 2 mana. So you can make a bunch of green mana and do big green things. That, as a deck, we know is not great anymore. Why I'm really high on this card, however, is because I think Earthbend is really good, and I want to have Earthbend in my cube in some way, and I think this is the best Earthbend creature. The fact there's no real downside with Earthbend, I like it. They have made it so that you can't pick the land you played that turn, and then it can't tap for mana because you made it a creature. They have fixed it so that when it dies, you get it back. You get the land back. That's all good. They're not just going to be blowing up your lands. But while this is really strong, is that because of that, when it dies or is exiled, return to the battle tapped clause. This is quite fun with things like fetch lands or like Strip Mine or Urza's Saga. You can the way this works with fetch lands is if you Earthbend onto a fetch land and then fetch, your fetch land comes back into play as just a fetch land that's tapped, meaning this card lets you fetch twice. With Strip Mine, it lets you strip mine them twice. That's pretty good. I like Earthbend as a mechanic, and that's why I'm kind of high on this card, because this is the cheapest, most efficient creature with Earthbend, and I want to include at least 1 copy of Earthbend in my cube now, because I think that interaction with fetch lands and with lands sacking themselves is really cool. That's kind of why I like this, on top of it being like a mana dork as well. It gets in the cube for being a 2 mana dork, but does some cool stuff on top of that, which is why I like it.
Yeah, so a nice little bit. It's nice when your sort of functional 2 mana dork actually has some synergies, right? That seems very cool. There's also a really stupid combo that no one's ever going to do, but it's quite funny.
What is it, James?
So if you have a Shire Soul of the Wild, which I have seen in some derpy landsy cubes, this is the one where all your non-token creatures are forests. So if you have this in play, then the Badger Mole Cub can Earthbend onto itself because it's a land.
Okay.
And then when it dies, it comes back. So if you have a sack out there, it dies, it comes back.
Infinite. That's hard.
And then you just go round and round.
That's kind of hot. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
A Shire isn't very good, sadly. But, it's fine in a certain sort of cube. But
that is kind of hot. That is fun. I like the Badger Mole Cub, and I like Earthbend. I think there's some cool things you can do with this card. All right, let's keep it going. Next up, we have Earthbender Ascension. This is 2 and a green for a enchantment. When this enchantment enters, Earthbend 2. So we've just seen Earthbend. This one will put 2 counters on a land and animate it. You then search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. It also has Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a quest counter on this enchantment. When you do, if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, put a +1 counter on target creature you control. It gains trample until end of turn. So, for me, the way that this gets into a cube is if you are being a little bit slower, because effectively this is getting in the slot of a 3 mana rampant growth. That's kind of where, if you are in a cube where you can run a 3 mana rampant growth, then I think you can consider this. Because this comes in, it gets you the land, it gives you a 2/2, And of all the Ascensions that we've talked about, I think this is the easiest to activate because you're a green deck, you're going to be playing lands. Like, if you play this on, 2 because you've ramped it, you're easily going to be hitting the next, 3 land drops. Like, if you hit a fetch land on the next turn, you're basically there. At that point, you kind of have a build your own bristly bill, which I think is quite nice. And the additional trample is good. Like, it will help you push some damage through if you can get this going. I think this is slow, but I think, like all the Ascensions, it is probably too slow for the most higher power level cubes. But if you are going a bit longer in your games, if you have time to do mid-rangey stuff and build like an engine, I think this is cool if you have a landfall theme. Like, I do like putting counters on my creatures when I play lands. We have been shown that this year and last year that is one of the best things. That is a really cool and strong thing you can do. This is not as strong as the creatures that do it, but it does also get you a land on the way in. It's kind of like all the Ascensions. It's kind of like it's two halves of like cool things that are both a little bit underpowered, but they're both slapped on one card, which is nice. So yeah, for slower cubes, but Earthbender Ascension, a fine Magic card.
Yeah, it seems very, very solid. So if you're in that slower cube, do you think you like this over like Cultivate, say?
I think so, because Cultivate is effectively 2 land drops, but this is 1 land drop plus Wincon. Is that fair to say? So I think I like it there. I think even in those slow cubes, I think I still prefer Rampant Growth over this, if I'm honest with you.
Oh yeah, me too.
Just because it's just even in slower cubes, you still need to be efficient in some things, and like the early turns in those cubes are very much about setting up your game plan. I think I like this over Cultivate, but it might depend how many colors the deck is. If the colors is like 3 or 4 colors, then fixing yourself for 2 lands might be better. But I think it is close.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking. As if I'm playing 3 mana for a ramp spell, I want all my colors to be great forever, you know. But I mean, this is a body. It is like some relevance in the late game. So yeah, maybe you can do something. All right. Next up, we have the Great Divide Guide. This is 1 green for a 2/3 creature human scout ally. It says each land and each ally you control has tap to add 1 mana of any color. So obviously it is itself an ally, so it taps some mana. By itself, this is a perfectly solid 2 mana accelerant, but and we're talking with the Badge Mold Club about how many really good 2 mana accelerants there are and how strong the competition is. You're never picking this one, I don't think. Over like Caryatid, Fanatic Favonius, any of these great cards. So what else does this do for you? It fixes it makes all your lands tap for mana of any color. That's fine, but like realistically, once I have 1 Wooburg fixer, I'm assuming my colors are fine now, you know? Like
I've played a lot more worse mana bases than you have, James.
Well, here's the thing, right? If my mana draw was so bad that it couldn't be fixed by a Wooburg fixer, I probably built my deck wrong, you know? Would be my approach.
Yeah, I would agree. I've built many mana bases that are ropey.
I don't think you should rely on this, is what I'm saying. But
that's fair.
I think it's fine, but I guess I would I only actually think it's exciting if you are doing allies in some way, and I think that's really niche, and I don't know that people actually run allies as a theme in Cube very often.
No, that's fair. I think this can get in if you're not supporting allies, just because there are cubes where this ability will be fine. Where just like I'm thinking more budget cubes that are trying to support multicolored decks, but don't have the ability to do perfect fetch mana base, that kind of stuff. Like I am saying this as someone who will put a Chromatic Lantern in a 5-color commander deck and be like, well, it's fine. I'll draw the Chromatic Lantern and everything is fine. So part of me is a bit lazy and likes this ability. I think this is fine. It is a relatively decent statted body. A 2 mana 2/3 is decent, but as you say, it is just there is a lot of competition. I think if you are building as someone who is going to put together like a tricolor cube, like a tricolor slower cube, I think I'm a bit higher or in those type of environments where you really want to be making multiple colors and get really splashy with your mana bases. I could see this having a slot there, if I'm honest with you. But yeah, from a raw, efficient point of view, there's so many yet too that just do something, and this is a bit more generic. Like you have things like Biophagus if you want to do counters, you have Lotus Cobra if you want to do lands on top of the ones that you've mentioned that are just generally more efficient. So this one's unique ability is that I think if 4 and 5 color decks are supported in your cube, and then what you're trying to do, then I think this has a place. But outside of that, I agree. I think it is a bit more niche.
Yeah, for sure. You're entirely right. The stats are really good for a 2-mana dog, but yeah, it feels like the other ones are all more exciting, you know. But yeah, I guess if you have, say, this and Lantern in your deck, then you can more reliably cast the like really outrageous costs, right? You can try and put like Niv Mizzet in your deck or nonsense like that, you know.
I do like that. I was just trying to look up what allies I run in my cube, and currently I don't think I run any, because I think I cut Gideon ally of Zendikar that makes ally tokens. We'd assume there might be some more from this set, but I think, yeah, as we kind of touched on in our overview yesterday, specifically an ally sub-theme is, like, creature type matters is very hard in cube, and that's when you have things like humans, elves, goblins, and zombies. Allies is a niche further down that's not why this is going in a cube, basically. All right, next up, we have Origin of Metal Bending. This is 1 and a green for an instant lesson with choose one. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, or put a +1 counter on target creature you control. It gains indestructible until end of turn. So, every set nowadays has a naturalize with some upside, and here is this set's one. I do quite like that the upside on your sideboard naturalize is that it is a protection spell. Both of those are kind of cards that I want to run in a cube. I want to run like a Tameo Safekeeping in some cubes, and I want to run a naturalize in some cubes. So having them all on the same effect on one card is nice. It feels like this is a sideboard card that you can main deck, that like both sides will come up pretty regularly. Like at some point, either your opponent's going to play an artifact or enchantment you want to kill, or they're going to put point of burn spell at your best creature, and then you can protect it. Like both of those things will come up, which is nice. This is also the only lesson we're going to be talking about today. That won't be relevant for so many cubes at this point. Lessons are like effects that kind of like, if you play a card with learn, you can go get a lesson from your sideboard and put it into your hand. That is a package that we've only really seen in Strixhaven. This will come up maybe more when Strixhaven 2 comes out next year. Then there might be some more cards with learn, and there might be enough to actually make a learn package be more of a thing. That will be something that we'll talk about closer to the time, and we'll be talking about other lessons, not just this one, but other lessons from this set and from original Strixhaven when it becomes a bit more relevant.
Yeah, for sure. We're just looking at this as a card in isolation, right? Ignoring the lesson type. And I think it's pretty fine. Yeah, these are both effects that are slightly narrower than you would normally want to put in your main deck. If you staple them together, I think it is a perfectly fine main deckable card. Assuming you're playing a deck where you actually want a protection spell, of course. Listen, 2-mana protection spells are a lot worse than 1-mana protection spells because you're just paying so much more of a cost if you leave it up and then don't use it. And it's only indestructible. It's not hexproof and indestructible, right? So we, exile-based removal or bounce effects, this doesn't stop them. But as an upside to get on your disenchant, I think it's fine. I guess the sort of slot this is competing with is something like an Outland Liberator as the sort of main deckable naturalize, right? We normally see the creatures in that slot at the moment. So this is kind of an alternative approach where you can have a protection spell rather than a creature as the sort of backup mode to your naturalize.
No, yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. All right, we have a couple more cards in green. James, what do you think of Tale of Katara and Toph?
Yeah, this is 2 and a green for an enchantment. There's Creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped for the first time during each of your turns, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So I think normally you're not playing this on turn 3 so much most of the time, right? You're hopefully getting a bit of a board, play this, swing the team, they all get counters. Hopefully the counters makes your opponent block worse, ones that survive, swing again next turn, and you snowball from that. I think there will be games where this feels like the absolute nuts, you know? It feels like the best card in the world when you've curved out and this like turns on all your attacks and then it's going to snowball really quickly, right? I don't think that means it's a good card. I think there are just too many games where the one counter isn't going to be enough to give you a good attack. And if you don't have a good attack, this does nothing. It does nothing if you're behind. It does nothing if they've killed too many of your creatures. I think mostly this has the win more problem, you know? I think it's going to be great in games where you were doing really well anyway. What you have to weigh up, I think, right, is when you draw this card, like, what if this was just a generic, like a powerful 3-mana creature that I put in this cube? I think most of the games where this is good, the good 3-mana creature would probably be good enough anyway. And the games where you're behind or the games where your opponent has killed all your stuff, you're going to be thrilled to draw your 3-mana creature, and this is going to be a blank piece of cardboard. So having channeled my inner Marshall Sutcliffe, I guess, I don't think this is a good card, so I don't think you should put it in your deck.
So I'm a little higher on it than you, but not tremendously. Like, where I think I like this is in a deck that has a bunch of mana dorks, because the mana dorks don't have to attack. They can be triggered just by you ramping. And it doesn't take it away that this is the definition of a do-nothing enchantment. I am fully caveat out of the way. I do like the idea of effectively that this and a bunch of mana dorks, and you do kind of have a win con.
But the thing is, most of the time you don't have a bunch of mana dorks, right? You have like an Elvish Mystic, and then you played 3 mana to like put a counter on your Elvish Mystic every turn. I don't know if that's good enough.
Yeah, no. I'm not the highest on this, but I will say it does get better if you are in a cube that is doing +1 counters. Like, people do run cards like the Ozolith in cube. I think by that I'm also referring to myself. I have run the Ozolith in cubes before, and like that, and the green Ozolith as well. Like, there are decks that care about counters, and this is a way of actively putting counters on all of your creatures repeatedly every turn. And I agree that in most synergistic, like, high-powered devil cubes where you are playing just efficient stuff, this doesn't touch it. But in cubes where you have time to build a bit of an engine, I don't hate this. Like, I'm not like, it's not like effectively it's a green Anthem. Like, we would run an Anthem in a white deck.
It's a green Anthem when you're attacking.
Yeah, but the buff stays though. It is a counter.
Yeah. But if you need to block with your creatures,
I'm not blocking. But yeah. I'm not the highest on this card, but I don't think there is no use for it. I think, but yeah, personally, I think in a cube that's doing counters and has time to build an engine, I think this is a fine include. Again, like, it's also a cube where you can take off turn 4 or 5 to play this and something else. Like, that is not a portion of cubes, but in some cubes you can, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you could win games with it. So I quite like the Ozolith as an example, but the Ozolith is good, right? Because you can hang out, and if your creature doesn't have to have a good attack right now to get the counters, like, you can activate for it for a couple of times, build up a big creature, then attack. Whereas with this, right, if you have a 2/2 and they have a 4/4, this doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just can't attack still, right? And the Ozolith is cool as well because it synergizes with your other +1/+1 counter cards. I guess I just don't quite get the appeal of this one. But
I might have thought of something to win you round.
Go on.
What do you think of this as an opposition payoff? If you need to win more with an opposition. You're thinking. I know you're thinking.
I'm being exploited.
I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'll defend opposition to the hill. But and do we need this with opposition?
No,
we're winning anyway.
Yeah. yes, fair. Okay, yeah. I think let's move on. I think, there's more cool cards to talk about. So
yeah. Tell me about this sad man and his cabbages.
Yeah, he's having a terrible day. Next up, we have Unlucky Cabbage Merchant. It is a 1 and a green for a 2/2 creature human citizen, with when this creature enters, create a food token. It also has whenever you sacrifice a food, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you search your library this way, put this creature on the bottom of its owner's library, then shuffle. So, this is not one for every cube. This is for cubes that are exploring the food deck. I really like the food deck. It got a lot of cool pieces in like Eldraine and Lord of the Rings, and we're going back to it next year in The Hobbit, so you'd assume there's going to be some more food stuff. In those decks, this is kind of a rampant growth, because it comes in, it gives you the food to synergize with your deck. Like, those decks just want cheap ways of making food. This is a 2-mana creature that comes in and guarantees to make us a food. And then when we inevitably sack a food for some kind of value or for some kind of engine, we can then ramp ourselves as well. Or we can sack the food to itself to go rampant growth. Like, this is not inefficient as a rampant growth, but in the deck, this is like in cubes that are generally doing the food deck is a little bit slower. It needs to be in a slower environment. That's kind of where this could be. Like, if this was repeatable, if that was like a colon, whenever you sacrifice a food, like if it was like that and you didn't have to shuffle this in every time, I would be like super high on this. But the fact that effectively they have made it fair by no matter what you do, you can only rampant growth once. Like, you can't, because it's all one block of text, James, I don't think you can't respond to the trigger by sacrificing another food, can you?
You actually can, I believe.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that more then. Okay.
Yeah. So because it shuffles, it puts a trigger on attack, and then it shuffles in when the trigger resolves, right? So if I crack a food, hold priority, crack another food, I have 2 triggers on the stack. It shuffles in when the first trigger resolves, but the second trigger will still resolve, right? This doesn't have to still be on the battlefield for me to get my food, for me to get my land. Sorry. So that does work.
Okay.
Obviously, you need to have mana to sacrifice multiple foods at a time if you want to do that to get your multiple lands. Or maybe you have another way to sacrifice a bunch of foods. But yeah, that is an option on this card, which I think is quite good. Yeah, I think this is cool. It's the food deck also very often is 3 or more colors. So getting a synergistic piece of fixing for it is quite nice. And I think the food deck can be quite powerful and can compete in, I mean, not, like super, super high power, but like fairly powerful cubes. Probably the most powerful version of the food deck, this is a bit slow. But in a more like mid-power level thing, I think this is totally fine. It's like, it's like a cool and synergistic way to fix your mana, right? It's a bit more interesting than just putting rampant growth in your deck.
Yeah. Ooh, the fact that you can do multiple with this means I probably need to put this in Treat Yourself where you can do that. That's actually kind of hot. I do like that. It does require setup, but like there's ways of sacrificing artifacts that are free. Like crack Clan Ire works all your food away, go and get a bunch more mana.
Exactly, that sounds sick. There's even stuff like I don't know what any of the stupid hobbits are called, but there's a hobbit that says like devour food free. So it enters and you sack all your food, and then you put a bunch of counters on it for each food you sack.
Ravenous House Guest? Maybe?
That sounds like something they'd call a hobbit, yeah. But if you put that into play, right, you sack all your food, you have a giant hobbit, and you like just go and get 5 lands, That seems pretty good.
It does seem... Sorry, it's Feasting Hobbit. That's the
Comes in with Devour Food 3. That one's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, I am adding Unlucky Cabbage Merchant to my buy list. Okay, nice. We're moving on to Multicoloured, James. What do you think of Toff Hard-Headed Teacher?
Yeah, so Toff is 2, a red and a green for a 3/4 legendary creature human warrior ally. Says when Toff enters, you may discard a card. If you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And whenever you cast a spell, Earthbend 1. If that spell is a lesson, put an additional +1/+1 counter on that land. So I think there's a couple of nice things going on with this. Firstly, we get a bunch of regrowths now, but most of them are just for permanence. It's a bit harder getting back spells, sort of at a decent rate on your creatures. So I kind of like that. It lets you recur a bunch of interesting spells. That's good. And when you cast a spell, Earthbend 1, I think is decent because one thing we maybe should have flagged with Earthbend a little more earlier, you can pile up the counters on the same land. You don't have to distribute them. And the fact that it's whenever you cast any spell, that if you have instants, you can sort of do it as a trick, right? Which is quite nice. And it makes your lands a little harder to block because you're always threatening that. And you're threatening to make blockers at instant speed. I think all of that plays quite well. Having said that, this is 4 mana. The ETB, whilst it's nice, it's not actually getting you up cards. Earthbend 1 is fine as a spell payoff, but we can do better, and it is a gold card. I think this is a cool card. It will lead to some interesting play patterns. It's not super powerful, but I think it does some interesting things. I wouldn't be opposed to running it in some cubes.
No, I'd agree. I think this is one of the few ways of repeatable Earthbend, which I do like, and as I've gone over in this episode, I am quite high on it. So there is probably something cool you can do with this as like a Earthbend payoff or something like that. Maybe just like repeatedly.
Oh wait, we can strip mine lock them with repeatable Earthbend.
That's quite hard.
Kind of. It's not easy, but
well, I would just need to keep casting spells.
Yeah. Ponder, strip mine you. That sounds great.
Well, I'm thinking more, if we're doing it in that deck, we have Life from the Loam as ways of keep getting it back. Keep casting Life from the Loam, keep strip mining them, do it.
I mean, arguably, Life from the Loam lets you keep strip mining them even if you don't have this guy.
Yeah, it's true. But but we can do other stuff as well. But yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Torf. Yeah. I think this one is cool. It is definitely. Yeah, as you mentioned, it is definitely harder as a gold slot. But if it's what your gold section is doing, like if you are doing anything kind of spells based in Gruul, like that does sound more like that pump deck, like that pump powers matters deck that was in Let Go for a while that we kind of talked about last episode. But yeah, could be a fun one. Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, no, I think it's sweet, and I'm way higher on the Earthbend thing. I hadn't realized the fetch land strip mine interaction. I do think that's really cool.
That's going to mess up some games, but I'm here for it. All right. Let's move on to lands now. We have Abandoned Air Temple. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a basic land. It has tap to add a white, and you can pay 3 and a white to tap and put a +1 counter on each creature you control. So this is a fine effect that most of the time will be coming into play untapped, or if it is coming into play tapped, it probably won't matter. Like it probably does limit it to like a 2-color deck, but for this kind of effect, you're probably going to be in a 2-color deck anyway. The ability to put a counter on each of your creatures is quite nice. Like it is an effect that like could go generically into most like medium powered level cubes, but realistically, you're only going to put it in this land slot if you have synergy. Like as a generically powerful card, it doesn't compare to like Caracas and like a Ganjo, which are like the classic white land slot effect that we're generally running, because they're just very good at interacting with your opponent's stuff. But if you have counters, like specifically if you have stuff that cares about counters going onto creatures,
if you can double up those counters, or you can move them about in some cool way, or if your creatures gain trample when they have counters on them or flying. These are all things that exist, and all you care about is just finding ways of putting more counters onto all of your creatures repeatedly. Then this is a solid include. Like, because this land has to tap itself, like, yes, it is 3 and a white, but realistically that's 5 mana because you're down this land as well to do it. 5 mana to put a counter on each of your creature. You're also probably at that point actually needing to be going pretty wide with your creatures as well. Like, putting 5 mana, put 2 counters on 2 creatures isn't really it. But it's on a land, so effectively it's free to include in your deck. It's more the cube slot, basically. Like, we only get so many lands, and after the generic ones I've mentioned, this could get in if you are specifically doing that counters theme.
Yeah, sure. I think this is pretty solid. I like that it's telling you to put it in a white aggressive deck, right, with the ability, and in that deck, this will come into play untapped the vast majority of the time, right? So there's a whole cycle of these, you know, come into play taps unless you control a basic land. They're all much better in decks of fewer colors, basically, because you're just going to be running more basics. This is going to come into play untapped the vast majority of the time. And this is good upside. I really like that it's, normally these sort of abilities are sorcery speed only. This one isn't. So there's a pretty big threat of activation thing going on here. It's going to make combat a bit of a nightmare for your opponent. Having said that, of course, this is less powerful than Caracas. It's probably less good than Iganjo on in the majority of decks, right? Iganjo just goes in every white deck. This doesn't so much. But yeah, I think if you're doing a counters thing, or probably more, I'd say if you're just doing a go wide thing. And I think a lot of cubes don't want to run something like a Caracas. I think this is a pretty good payoff for going wide, and a very cheap cost to include. Yeah, obviously, yeah. As you said, the issue with these sort of monocolor with upside lands is always just the slot, right? If it's in the cube, people will play it because it's pretty free to play. But it's just, do you have space for it?
That brings us nicely onto the blue version of this effect. This one I feel will also suffer from competing against other cards in its slot, but with that being said, James, what do you think of Agna Queller?
Yeah, Agna Queller is a land, part of the same cycle, enters tapped unless you control a basic land. This one taps for a blue, and you can pay 2 and a blue and tap it, draw a card, then discard a card. I think this is weaker than the white one. It's just a lower impact ability. The blue decks are more likely to be multiple colors, so you're going to have this coming into play tapped a little bit more. But mostly, I think just paying essentially 4 mana to loot at pretty much any stage of a game is fairly weak. Whereas the white one, like, sure, it's a lot of mana, but in the right board state, it's going to be very powerful, right? This is just never that high impact. Listen, is similar to what I want. If you put it in the queue, people will play it. It will be solid, but there's only so many slots. Like, Blue has access to things like Otawara, even if you're not looking at the busted blue lands like a Sheldok Isle or Tolarian Academy. Yeah, I don't know. If you're running like Castle Vantress in your cube, yeah, this is better. But I don't think many people are.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would play this in pretty much any blue deck in cube, but I'm not excited by it. Like, I'll take it if I'm in blue, but this one really does like compete against like so many, like blues really competes against so many like cool cards or stronger cards. Like is it better than Cephalid Colosseum, James? I love Cephalid Colosseum.
Cephalid Colosseum's really sick. No,
yeah,
maybe not.
But yeah, that's just where we are. Like, Again, if I saw this in a lower powered level cube because someone opened it at pre-release and wanted to put a blue land in, I would I don't think it's incorrect to put this in a cube if you want it in a cube, but it's competing against so many other options that kind of give you a bit more like it's a very generic card, basically. I think is I am unexcited by this card, but it is a fine card. Our last card of the day, I'm a bit more high on. Basing Sea. It is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land, so it's still a part of that cycle. This one taps for a green, and it has 2 and a green, tap, Earthbend 2, activate only as a sorcery. So all of the things that we've said about Earthbending previously apply to this card, but this is also a land. So the fact that this can go in our lands deck, and like in our lands deck where we're going to be running things like crop rotation, where we're going to be running things like prime time, that is quite nice. And like repeatable Earthbend, like it can give you blockers if you're behind. And then it can start doing the cool things. Like, I feel this isn't a strong card by itself, but if you combine it with other strong cards, like Fetch Lands, like Urza's Saga, like Strip Mine, like Wasteland, then this does get better. That is where I'm interested in trying this. And it might be too slow for the most powerful of cubes. Like, spending 3 mana to Earthbend 2 is quite slow. Like, spending 3 mana to Strip Mine them every other turn is slow. But it is interesting. And, like, that's just, like, the Strip Mine thing was, like, the immediate thing that came up in my head. But, like, there will be other lands and other cool stuff you can do with this that I think I kind of like. This is also one of the few ways of repeatable Earthbend as well. And that is interesting because, yeah, as I said, I want to try Earthbend in my cube in some way. The Cub is probably the one I'm going to be going with. But there's a world where that card's randomly, like that card could be quite expensive because it's a mythic. I could slip this in quite a bit cheaper and give it a go. The downside is that the sorcery speed is annoying and the 3 mana is annoying, and it's also 4 mana because you have to tap this land as well. But I want to try Earthbending in my cube. There's a world where I give this a go.
Yeah, this looks like you can spend a tremendous amount of mana over a very long game to accumulate some incremental value, and I'm kind of here for it. Like, imagine I just have like an Elvish Reclaimer in play, he's hanging out, there's nothing to do. We go and get this, then next turn we Earthbend the land, we Reclaimer it away, we go and get our Wasteland or Strip Mine or Urza's Saga or something cool. And then we're off to the races, right? But yeah, no, in reality, that is all very slow. And, you've just got to take that into account when you're thinking about what cube to put this in. And honestly, it's probably not a cube with Urza's Saga because that card is not very slow.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, but there'll be some cool stuff to do with it. And I'm sure you can figure it out.
Yeah, a lot of cool cards from this set, and that's going to do it for our set review. Before we get you all out of here, James, are there any cards in particular from the 2 episodes that kind of stand out to you that you're thinking of testing in your powered cube?
Yeah, so I quite like Wan Shi Tong, the 5 mana, tuck your thing, get some 1/1s, maybe get some more 1/1s later. I think that card's strong. I quite like the Mechanist, the guy that makes clues when I cast non-creature spells. And outside of that, I think those are the ones I'm considering for more like high power level cubes. But for I've got a dual commander cube I'm working on, which is a bit less powerful, and I think there's some other interesting possibilities for that. I do like the Cub a lot. I've got doing a lot of landsy stuff in that cube, so I'm going to be trying some amount of Earthbending. I'm not sure which ones yet.
No, that's definitely, yeah. The Badgermole Cub, I think, seems the most obvious test for me. Probably depends if I open one or if I do a proxy order at some point. But yeah, that one seems pretty good. I'm not against trying Appa Steadfast Guardian, like the 4 mana 3/4 Bison Ally. That one does seem pretty good. But yeah, and then I think I'm actually tempted to test both Wan Shi Tongs, the 5 mana one and the X blue one in some of my cubes. And then Phoenix Airship, I think it might be the first card I pre-order in a while, just because I want to try that in my Treat Yourself cube, and I need to put the list together before Cube Clash in a couple of weeks. So I'm kind of here for that.
Nice, yeah, sounds sick.
Marvellous. Right, well, so that's going to do it for today. James, pleasure, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Nice, yeah, a bunch of cool cards. And yeah, Avatar looks like a fun set to draft. We'll report back in once we've got some games in. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thank you all very much for listening. Do make sure you give the podcast a 5-star review, thumbs up, whatever the positive affirmation your podcast platform lets you do. Please do it. Would greatly help us out. Until next week, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.